Hello and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing the episode titled Villain from Series 7. Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section down below. And now I'm going to get into what I thought about it as we now get into the positives. And, well, it looks like I was wrong here. I thought the whole stuff with the UA spy thing was pretty much wrapped up the moment the character said, yeah, this isn't a thing anymore, let's move on. So, yeah, I was wrong, which only goes to prove that even I can make human mistakes. I will just say in the here and now that my emotional reaction to this episode wasn't as strong as it really should have been. Now, this isn't due to failures within the episode itself, it's not due to a failure of the performance or the writing, it's just due to the fact that prior spoilers diminished any kind of emotional weight that this episode had. So bear that in mind as we get into the episode of this, and once again, don't spoil anything in the comment section or more broadly on YouTube, because that's a massive issue, I feel. But anyway, to talk about the episode itself, in this episode, as previously hinted, this is the time that we finally get the identity of the UA-Mo revealed. Even though they said a couple of seasons back that this isn't a thing, we may have been wrong, and despite that coming from a storyline that it probably should have been included as part of that. But I'll discuss that shortly in a little bit more detail later on. Towards the start of this episode, we get a nice little smattering of action, seeing our cast doing some training activities, which is all presented well for what it was. It was about on par with pretty much any other action sequence in this season thus far, for better or worse, but understandably so. They're not exactly going to be breaking the bank and pushing the animation budget to its absolute limits for the sake of an action sequence which really just doesn't amount to much of anything. They're probably going to be saving that for later in the season, or at least the latter half of it, we hope, because I will admit the animation in the action sequences hasn't quite been there for me, but again, I don't think we're quite there for needing that kind of stuff as these. I'm using the word there a little bit too much, so we'll end up moving on. I will say as a genuine, definite, definitive positive is that I think that the pacing for this episode was great. It didn't feel like a whole 25 minutes, which I will admit it kind of sounds like damning with faint praise, but I will say is that even though the dramatic impact of a lot of things within this episode was diminished, the drama unfolding here and the performances therein was just so absorbing that I really didn't realise just how much time had passed. It was just such a captivating little stretch of time that by the time the episode ended, I thought, wait, what? We should only be halfway into this, despite the fact we had the little where the ad break should have been, the little eye catcher things indicating where the ad break should have been. So I should have known, but by the end of the episode, I was just expecting for the next half of it to come along, which, you know, is good in my opinion. It makes you want more, it makes you want to see more, it really gears you up and gets you interested for what will end up coming in next week. I will say is that even without the issues of spoilers ahead of time, actually talking about the drama and the weight of the drama is something that is fairly difficult to do. I read and watch far heavier and more impactful stuff than this, and in the broader context of this series, I will admit that the drama with Aoyama isn't quite up there. This might be due to how this mystery has been fed out throughout the series, and possibly due to the soft presence that Aoyama has had throughout. Had he been more of a central character, or had this been around the time of the summer festival where he was starting to become more of a focus, I think that it would have hit better there. But with that said, I will say is that it was still good for what it was. To anyone who didn't know about this ahead of time, the fact that this character turned out to be a traitor of all things, especially bearing in mind the Summer Festival stuff, especially bearing in mind the presence they've had in the series up until this point, it probably will have hit them fairly hard. Maybe not as hard as I really think it should have been. I think there's maybe a couple elements missing here and there, but still it was good for what it is. One thing I would definitely praise as far as this whole mystery is concerned is just how it has been unfolding throughout the series up until this point. In this episode, we get these constant flashbacks and cutaways to things that have happened in the past in this series that were hints, that were setting up that this was the way that things were going to end up going. Stuff which you know, to borrow a phrase, you didn't notice, but your brain did. Just stuff that happened in the background that in the moment we just excused it as, oh, it's the character hiding because they're cowardly, or this is the character trying to do something heroic to prove that they're not a coward, and oh, they're just being weird, or this, that, and the other. And now it's been revealed that all that stuff that's been building up in the background actually had a greater meaning to it beyond just character drama and beyond just little character quirks. seeing it now on the macro scale, looking at it with the full lens, we can see all the signs that were there from almost the moment this character was introduced into the series. I should say that a couple years back I was thinking about doing a video speculating as to who the spy was going to end up being, and it came down for me to 3 candidates. One of them was Aoyama, one of them was President Mike, and one of them was Ojiro, you know, the guy with the tail. Maybe one day I'll release that video and explain my full thoughts and speculations regarding that, but I will admit that in the here and now it does feel like locking the stable door after the horse has already dropped dead. The fact actually it does show just how well planned everything was ahead of time, I think is really commendable. There has been this weird undercurrent with some of the conversations and discourse surrounding this series that some people think that a lot of this stuff really is just made up on the spot and it is flying by the seat of their pants, and yet you have storylines like this where it's proof that it isn't. All the signs for this storyline were there for many months in the past. This isn't just someone trying to recontextualize the actions of characters in the past to make it seem like, oh, they were the bad guy all along. No, they were always there, it's just that for a lot of people they didn't see it. Of course, there's a lot of speculation videos on YouTube and beyond that end up saying that Aoyama is probably the spy because X, Y, and Z, and they probably did reference those scenes that ended up being referenced today, but yeah, it just ends up going to show that this isn't just made up on the back of a burger wrapper during the lunch break, that there's a lot more thought going into this than planned. So at times I have been speculating myself in the past, I will admit. In the early stages of this episode, we do get some scenes with All For One explaining how everything's going all according to plan. And Ing's explaining how he comes up with all his plans ahead of time with a bunch of backups and alternative plans so that if something goes wrong, he can pivot into something else, which, yeah, good. Sure, it helps to build him out as being more of a threat. He isn't just some blunt object that's going to just beat the world in submission. He has been planning all of this for decades, if not even longer, to try and get the great win that he feels that he ends up deserving. And it helps to display him as being a genuine, sophisticated mastermind of criminality and villainy, and I do like that. However, given the events of this episode and the previous one, let's be honest, this is either a setup for he isn't really as smart as he thinks he is, or that there are blind spots that he himself still can't see, or that despite everything, despite our heroes having oh heck, we're gonna stop the villains, we're gonna set a trap for that mean old All For One and his cronies, it's gonna end up backfiring, and at this moment we can't really say which of those things it's going to end up being, but I will say is that, you know what, it definitely feels like setup. It definitely feels like setup, but I don't know what it's setting up for. And it is kind of interesting. There's something that flashed into my mind, but I didn't really put into the notes, is that had this series of events been different, had they had this scene of him discussing about how he planned this stuff out ahead of time towards the start of this season, then we got into the Stars and Stripes stuff, and we've things evolving the way that they did do, and then we got the scene with Aoyama deciding to reveal that he is the spy, or being forced into revealing that he is the spy, that he wouldn't be seen to be the big great mastermind that he is, because immediately then he would have had 2 major things that kind of screwed up his plans. But of course he will argue, and people that like him will argue, ha 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 ha, these are only minor footnotes in his grander master plan. He will win, at least until Deku gets his shit together and then punches him really, really hard in the face until he explodes. What we'll end up seeing. I will say is I did think that all this stuff with Aoyama and for Star and Stripe was going to be far longer than it ended up being. Before this season started, like I said previously, I've had a lot of this stuff spoiled for me ahead of time. So when it came to this season and speculation as to, is this going to be the final season or not, I thought to myself, well, no, because the first half of it is going to be centered around the Star and Stripe stuff, and then the second half of this season is going to end up focused around the UA traitor thing, and that's how they end up going to dole it out. I just at the time didn't realise just how short these storylines were. Granted, both of them aren't really finished. There's going to be still stuff coming down the pipeline with both of them. There's still going to be repercussions and things building up from them from there out. But even still, there is a part of me that just can't help but sit here and go, wow, what the Christ do we do next? Which I suppose, on the one hand, I'm really excited for, because it means that bar a few things that are coming down the pipeline, which still regrettably have been spoilt for me, bar a few visuals and a few things that have been spoilt for me, I've largely got a clear plate ahead of me. I think for the first time in a very long time, I don't know every major plot point coming down the pipeline for a particular season, which is really exciting. But on the other hand, it does make me fear that the next time I open up YouTube, it's going to end up revealing what comes next. Particularly bearing in mind that the manga is coming to like its final few chapters, so hold on to your butts, everybody. It's about to get really unnecessarily complicated because idiots on YouTube just can't keep their damn mouth shut. But hopefully we'll be able to get to the end of this whole series as a whole, without any major spoilers between then and now, knock on wood. Though we'll soon see about that. Whilst we are starting in a still negative mood, let us actually talk about the negatives. And I will admit that in the grand scheme of things, this is a really petty and minor one. But I think that, you know, we have to be fair and we have to discuss all the things I think are negatives because these are all my opinions. You have different opinions, leave them in the comment section down below. And, again, I'm going to sound like an idiot because it is so petty. But the thing that I had an issue with this episode was the whole thing with Midoriya's hair being frizzy during the big important speech that Tenya and the others were giving about friendship and working together. Like, that was a big, emotional, significant, dramatic speech, something that's really going to end up playing into the character development of Midoriya and his friends, and about truly building up how he sees himself and how he sees being a hero and what it means to be a hero. And all the while, he's got his hair messed up because he was just exploded in the face. I think, yes, in the grand scheme of things, it's a petty thing, but I think that the juxtaposition of that and the dramatic nature of the speech really undercuts it. Like I say, this is a big important speech, something that itself is, whilst it's probably not going to be reflected upon too greatly in the grander scheme of things, is still one of those speeches and one of those monologues and those moments which does inform the character's decisions going forward, particularly when we get into the second half of this episode. The whole speech being effectively, we're all going to work together, we're all here to help you because you are our friend and we want to save the day to make the world better for everybody. And then you have the situation where they learn that one of their friends is a traitor, but it's okay because it's time for you to be the hero that you always knew you were going to be. We are going to work together and make this right. We're going to save the day. All of that works, all this art is fantastic. But every now and again, you can cut to Midoriya with his hair all frizzy, and that just takes something away from it. It doesn't defeat the speech, it has to be said. It's not something that ruins it. It's not something that takes away from it. It's not something that undermines it to the point it makes it farcical or silly or terrible. But it is one of those things that it just kind of feels like, was this the best creative choice that you had? Couldn't you have done something better here? Like, seriously, it's an animation. You have the whole thing of the frizzy hair for who gets exploded in the face. Then immediately the next scene, you just see him normal hair. Or you see him frizzing with his hair to make it normal or something resembling normal. To include that in that moment just kind of undermines it. Beyond this, I don't really have any major negatives aside from the fact that maybe... Actually, you know what? That isn't necessarily a negative. And if I was to discuss that, I'd probably discuss that in the season review overview thing when we get to it. Because... I will say is that the fact that the two major plot points I thought were going to make up most of this season have been largely resolved, even though they haven't been largely resolved, is something that kind of sticks out to me. It feels as though, just for the... Actually, let's move into the overview and just discuss this very briefly before I give my overall feelings of the episode, is that when it comes to the Star and Stripe thing, when it comes to the UA traitor thing, the fact that they are both pretty much solved with, or rather the key emotional crescendo moment is dealt with in a singular episode, I think is a little bit weird to me. Though it does suggest that more stuff with those storylines is coming down the pipeline. I've said pipeline and coming down the pipeline way too much in this review. Hey ho, maybe I should watch the Mario Brothers movie. Anyway, you get the idea. The fact those things resolve themselves relatively quickly, I think that they needed a little bit more of a lead into it. Maybe we should have a little bit more of a tease that we were now going to get into the stuff with the UA traitor before we immediately got back into it, especially bearing in mind that a couple of seasons ago we had the scene of them going, oh yeah, maybe there wasn't a traitor all along. Whoopsie-doo, guess we were wrong. And that's where we went with it, because there is that moment towards the start of the episode where it looks like the invisible girl is the one that's going to be the traitor because she's in the woods and you hear someone talking and it kind of sounds like her and talking about trying to hide and hiding information from people and all of that, so it ends up setting up that she's going to be the traitor, but immediately then we end up finding out that it isn't. And maybe had they built up a little bit more of that, a little bit of the uncertainty that, hey, maybe she's been the traitor all along, then you have the curveball of, oh no, it was Aoyama after all. I think that would have worked a little bit better for me, but still. I've just realised, yes, we're talking about the overview, my overall feelings of the episode. And as far as my overall feelings of the episode are concerned, I did like it. I will admit that once again that I think that the emotional weight of the episode was diminished due to the fact of spoilers online, and that had I watched this fresh, it would have been a bit of a gut punch, to say the least. Again, I think it would have been a lot stronger had Aoyama as a character had more of a presence throughout the series, had they had more to do, apart from just being a side character. But this is just a wider issue that I have with My Hero Academia, that after the first couple seasons or so, most of the side characters were pushed so far to the side that they felt like set dressing, so a lot of the stuff connected to them has felt lackluster. But still, with all that said and done, let's get into Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. Time for Comment Corner. Kicking off with Big X1, who says, this episode didn't go where I thought it would do. Disappointed we won't see more of Stars and Stripes. Thank you for your comment. Yeah, like I say, is that as much as I enjoyed the previous two episodes, again, as I've mentioned time and time again throughout this review, I thought this was the whole Star and Stripe thing as a whole thing was going to be the entire main focus of this half of the series, but ultimately didn't. Or rather, this half of the season, I should say, because I know that series and season mean different things to different people. But yeah, I'm surprised we didn't. I have a feeling that we're going to see more of her in some capacity or another. But still, good for what it was. I would have liked to have seen more, but again, I think we are going to end up seeing more in some capacity, be that what it may. Our next comment comes from Scott TV Gamer, back once again like a renegade master, who says, I get why it might seem like the author has backed into a corner by creating the 3-day deadline and then introducing Starter in order to fix it, but I legitimately believe that wasn't the case for a few reasons. Actually, just to give my input, not trying to change your opinion, the main one is the fact she was introduced in the same chapter as said deadline, implying that he had all this planned out and he could have just given the heroes more time. But another reason it has to do with the story goes later. No spoilers, but in this season, and especially the next, we'll see more about just how Star impacted the story. Thank you for your comment, and that it was an insightful one. I do like it, the fact that when we get comments that do discuss the deeper, the grander scope, I should say, and the deeper mechanics of the series, because I do appreciate it, because, as I've said in the past, I'm not really a manga or anime person, bearing in mind I've just spent the past 6 months reviewing a manga, and pretty much the past 2 years doing a video every week discussing an anime or a manga, but still, moving on to actually discuss the comic itself. Thank you for the comment. I have to say is that, especially after this episode, it is harder for me to really buy my own bullshit theory that Star and Stripe was just introduced in order to correct the deadline, because of that and other things in the series that have come up over recently, that it's kind of hard to make the argument that they are just flying on the seat of their pants because of just how things interlock with each other. I will admit, I think the interlocking and the interplay between certain plot elements could have been better and could have been stronger. And I will admit, it does feel like in certain areas, some things do feel as though they've been expedited and sped up. That maybe the plans for certain plot threads was to do them over a longer period, but then they decided, let's narrow it up. Like, I'm not going to sit here and pretend as though, oh god, I've just realised the character's only got 3 days, I better change that, let's introduce a new character and give them a very special superpower, and then we'll do this, and then we'll do that. I don't think that was the case. I do think that plans have changed, but I don't think this was ever... upon reflection, I don't think this was ever, oh crap, I've written myself into a corner, I need to undo that now. I certainly don't see that as being the case. But anyway, thank you for your comments. Let me know what you thought in the comment section down below, whether you loved this episode, whether you hated it. Let me know, and you will be read out in next week's video. At some point today, I'll be doing a second video on Doctor Who for people who are interested in that. I don't know when that's going to be. It depends on how certain other things hang and when I actually get time to review the episode. Wow, that's all. It's only second week and we're almost halfway through the season. Wow. Anyway, thank you all for listening and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!